Before recorded history, it was here. Before the time of Christ, it provided mankind with food. Before this country was born, it was a highway of explorers. And along its banks sprang settlements whose roots sink deep along the Illinois River. Hi, I'm Jim Wilhelm. In a land of few roads, the river was the main highway. And here Beardstown grew into a busy commercial port. Then the railroads arrived, and the future looked bright for a town founded as a transportation center. In 1819, Thomas Beard came to the newly formed state of Illinois to seek a location to start a settlement which would eventually bear his name. He chose this area because the river was shallow enough to operate a ferry, but Thomas was not the first to come here. Behind me once stood several Indian mounds, the highest rising over 80 feet. In fact, the early French explorers referred to this area as Mound Village. Since the Ice Age, people have lived and hunted in this area, although the civilization that built those mounds was long gone by the time the first Europeans arrived. The mounds, too, would disappear. The surrounding land upon which Thomas plotted his town was very sandy, so newly arriving settlers dug into the mounds for topsoil. So you could say that Beardstown literally sits on the foundation of an earlier civilization. Just like the past cultures, so too did the residents of Beardstown depend on the river, not only for food but for economic survival as well. The abundant resources of the Illinois River gave birth to several industries. One of these was commercial fishing. It wasn't uncommon for catches to exceed 50,000 pounds. In fact, one day in 1903, several fishermen brought to market over 2 million pounds of black bass. In addition, the backwaters and bays also attracted huge flocks of waterfowl. With the expansion of railroad service, these birds were transported to restaurants in Chicago and as far east as New York City. In the winter, hundreds were employed harvesting ice from the river. It was cut into huge blocks which were stored in several houses or shipped by rail to other towns. And before plastic, mussels were collected for their shells from which buttons were made at the local factory. Here's a couple of shells in which pearls were found, the dates and how much they were sold for. Today these items and pictures are all a part of the River Museum, located on the ground floor of the old Opera building, and are part of the Chamber of Commerce's office. As you might expect, shipping once played a key role in the town's economy, and one of the biggest names locally was Richard Hewlett. He was a river pilot who owned and operated several steamers out of his shipyard. One of those boats was this one, named Mary, after his wife. She was the first woman to earn a river pilot's license for this territory. Interestingly, their son George, who was an engineer on one of the family steamers, was unable to qualify for his pilot's license because he was colorblind. So in order to meet expenses, his wife got her license, and the two of them, along with their children, worked up and down the river. Yet it wasn't just the town's river location that brought prosperity. It was also due to the efforts of its founder. Remember Thomas? Because he didn't agree with the politics of those who ran Morgan County, he created Cass County and made Beardstown its seat. He also donated this land in the middle of town with the proviso that it be used as a marketplace to attract area farmers. And in 1844, he helped finance and build this new courthouse for the new county, which later became the site of a legendary trial. In 1858, on the second floor in this courtroom, a prominent attorney takes time off from his campaign for the Senate to defend the son of an old friend. The son, named Duff Armstrong, is charged with murder. His lawyer is Abraham Lincoln. It seems there was an altercation after a revival meeting in Bath, Illinois. Duff and another boy named Norris were accused of using a crossbar of an ox's yoke to beat another kid about the head. The kid rode home, and 2 days later he died. Norris was immediately convicted and sent to the new state prison in Alton. Duff was also scheduled to be tried in Bath, but emotions were running so high there that Lincoln was able to get a change of venue, and the trial was held in this courtroom. The prosecution has a strong case. On the stand, their key witness states he saw the beating by the light of the moon. During a break, Lincoln goes to a local pharmacy and buys a copy of the almanac, which shows that there was no moon on the night in question. Duff Armstrong never took the stand, and he was acquitted. Another interesting thing about this room, it's the only courtroom in the state where Lincoln practiced law that's still being used as a courtroom today. During the trial, a local photographer persuaded Lincoln to sit for this picture. It's the only known photo ever taken of Lincoln wearing a white suit, a summer outfit since the trial was held in August. As for the courthouse, in 1876, after the people refused to donate funds and refused to allow a new courthouse to be built in their open square, the county seat was moved down the road to the town of Virginia. However, the stubborn folks of Beardstown refused to give up the county records, so late one night several people from Virginia broke into this building and took them. Today, the building contained records of a different sort. Part of it is a town museum, preserving bits and pieces of Beardstown's history. In one case, we found a picture of the prosecuting attorney in the almanac trial, who is still remembered today for something very unusual that he did. His name was J. Henry Shaw, and in 1881 he wrote a deed transferring property, all in rhyme. For example, part of it reads, "Lot 2 in Block 40, said county and town, where Illinois River flows placidly down, and warrant the title forever and aye, waving homestead and mansion to both a goodbye." We're told that this paper is cited in several law books as an example of an unorthodox but legal document. Well, after the almanac trial, Mr. Shaw would go on to become a judge. Also on display are the plates and dishes that once graced the table of Thomas Beard. From the 1920s are these models designed by a couple of local inventors trying to perfect vertical flight. And there's a collection of papers and uniforms from both world wars. Welcome back to the Courthouse Museum in Beardstown, which has on display a rather large gun collection. The earliest are these Kentucky long rifles, which are similar to those used in our Revolutionary War. These are from the early 1800s. They all range about 5 feet in length and weigh about 10 pounds. Interestingly, this style of rifle was developed by German immigrants living in Pennsylvania, who modified their old world designs to meet the needs of frontiersmen. Also on display is this 1847 Harper's Ferry musket, once owned by John Giles, who was a member of the Union sharpshooter unit. He later died of smallpox and is buried in Memphis, Tennessee. From the days of the covered wagon comes this Ingate gun that weighs close to 30 pounds. Like a small cannon, it was loaded with broken chains and nails and fired at pursuers while resting on the back gate of the wagon. All these guns were purchased and gathered by a Mr. Black, who upon his death left the entire collection to Beardstown. But he didn't just collect guns. In addition to the weaponry are pieces of pottery and tools other civilizations left behind. With the promise of a bright future, the river has always drawn mankind to its banks. But in Thomastown, the future hit several snags. In 1922, there began a nasty railroad strike that ended only when the rail company left town. That was also the year of the Great Flood, destroying inventories, businesses, and homes. Combine all that with the continuing drain of the backwaters and bays for farmland, overfishing, pollution, it seemed that mankind had left the river. Today, much of the traffic on the Illinois River passes by this once busy port. Beardstown is now protected by a high flood wall, an almost symbolic separation of the town from the river that gave it life. Beardstown is, of course, far from dead, but today its economy is much less dependent upon the river. Today, its emphasis is upon agribusiness, small industry, and construction. For more information as to when the Beardstown River Museum is open, call 217-323-3271. To arrange a tour of the courtroom, call 217-323-3110.